Hi, everybody. Good afternoon from Kunming, China, or good morning if it's morning where you are, or good evening if it is evening where you are. This session is entitled Breathing Life into Writing, Reimagining the Assessment of Writing in L2 English. And the presenter is Jacob Patica. He is Assistant Professor, General Education and Research Chair at RIT Croatia. This is an international campus of Rochester Institute of Technology, New York, USA, where he teaches writing. He also teaches Introduction to English Language Teaching at the University of Rijeka. He has a PhD in language teaching and has taught English to learners age 6 and above. Hi, Jacob.
Good morning and good afternoon and good evening wherever you are. It's morning here in Rijeka in Croatia. It's 7:30 a.m.
Just some information for the audience. If you have any questions for Jacob, please type them into the chat box during the presentation at any time. We will have 10 minutes at the end where the questions will be addressed. I will now hand over to Jacob. Jacob, please start sharing your screen and begin when ready.
All right, thank you very much. Right, so again, hello everyone. The plan in the following 20 minutes is to cover the topic that you've seen the title of, but just to see where I'm connecting from. It's this little country in sort of the center of Europe, since this is an international conference, so just so you know where I'm at currently. So the background is to talk a bit about what it means to write in a second or foreign language, what is the essence of writing, especially today. Then to cover some basic notions related to the assessment of writing and to provide a bit of context for this study, and then go into details of the study and finally come to a conclusion. So what I think most of us already know is that there is, of course, a difference if you're writing in your first language or a foreign or second and so on. And it means that the starting positions are not the same, right? When you're learning to write in your first language, you can base a lot of it on your oral skills, on your oral language. And this is an advantage that speakers of second or foreign languages do not have, right? So that's the starting point is not the same. When we begin to write in a foreign language, we lack the oral skills that we would have in our first language. So what are the challenges that writers of English as a second or foreign language face? For Croatian speakers, and I think for some other languages as well, it's understanding the connection between phonemes and graphemes, which in Croatian is pretty explicit and straightforward, which is not the case in English, right? Then as learners write, they have to choose the appropriate word, and they have to code it grammatically, right? So they engage in phonological and lexical processing. Then, and this is an interesting field, you have to use punctuation marks sometimes in a different manner than in your first language, and this is what happens in Croatian versus English as well. Also, our learners are exposed to different varieties of English, and especially different kinds of English in terms of they have to distinguish between the formal use of English and something that they're exposed to, which is less formal and even informal and creative, like in advertisements or movies and songs, right? So there are different levels of formality, which make writing a bit more complex than speech. For these reasons, writing in a foreign language is considered to be more difficult and more time consuming than doing it in your first language. It is difficult in your first language as well. And what we do know is that many native speakers do not reach the highest level when it comes to writing skill in their first language, right? Let alone their second or foreign language. And something that we as teachers often forget, but should actually bear in mind, that when you're writing in a foreign or second language, you're actually using at least two languages, your first language or your mother tongue, and the one that you're writing in, right? And that's an important thing to remember. So we could also talk about writing in the first language. and compare it to writing in a second language from the following perspective. So even in our first language, writing has to be explicitly taught. And that is not the case with speech. We pick it up, right? And then if we look at L1 writing, it's pretty rare outside the school setting. We do most of our writing in school. And it's very much connected to our academic success, right? It happens that at university level, for example, and there are studies showing this, that if instructors see a student with poor writing, they make certain judgments about their critical thinking skills or their reasoning abilities, which may not be the case. The person could be a poor writer, but actually be very, very intelligent. But this is not how it's perceived. And then what happens with second language writing is that we have a variety of uses and purposes, which, for example, are missing in L1. So why do people write in a second language? This could be for various reasons. They could be in a bilingual program, or an immigrant, or pursuing an advanced degree in a different country, or a worker, and so on. So we have different purposes which do not appear in L1. So this would be writing in a foreign or a second language. What makes it trickier than writing in your first language, or what generally makes it trickier in terms of when you would compare it to speech. But what I would like to focus on is what is writing, right? As teachers, we have to ask ourselves, what is writing? And I'll use a couple of pictures to sort of capture the essence of writing. And you're familiar with this picture, definitely, if you're using your phone for texting. So what does it mean for me, or what do I think it means for writing? Is writing is a thinking process. You have to think before you write. Speaking is more spontaneous, right? But we're writing, it takes time, right? And these are the little three dots when you're texting or you're waiting for someone to text back. This is what you see. So they're thinking, and they're maybe editing their writing, which is the second point. When we write today, we can go back and edit. And in most cases, we do. Even with the simplest text messages, right? We go back and edit and change things at the word level, sentence level, and so on. And we have to wonder and think about, how often do we let our students do this in the classroom, right? If it's a pen and paper writing assignment, they often don't have this chance. But this is the reality of writing today. We can go back and edit, and we should, right? But are we doing this in the classrooms? That's the question. And the third thing that I think is essential when we think about writing today, and these little pictures paint the right picture, is it's interactive. For most of the time, if you think about how our students use writing or writing in English, it's interactive. So they talk to someone via messages, or they post comments on social media and get an answer, and so on. So it's interactive. And then again, the question is, how often in our classrooms do we let students engage in interactive writing? I think it's often one way, unfortunately. So now that we've covered this basic ground in terms of what writing is, the essence of writing, and how it's difficult in a foreign language, a couple of notions regarding the assessment of writing. We constantly hear about validity and reliability of tests and writing tests, and that is perfectly fine. But what often sort of is left out of the focus, and I think it's very, very important when it comes to writing, it's authenticity, and that piece with how interactive is it, right? So here are some questions which Mike sort of uses these questions based on Bachman and Palmer, right? Um, to put a focus on what really matters when we assess, and when we assess writing in particular. And the two that I'm focusing on is the authenticity, as I said, and how interactive the assessment task really is. So when it comes to authenticity, this is very, very challenging, very difficult to achieve in a classroom. But we have to ask ourselves what we're asking our students to do, and the way we assess their writing. Does it reflect their needs? Does it reflect how they use or will be using their English in real life? And interactivity is this piece where it's a combination of receptive and productive skills, right? But also whether they have a chance to get a response to their writing, or maybe are they responding to someone else's input? And these, I think, are often lacking in when we look at writing today across, and it's not just Croatia, but in different contexts as well. So for that reason, McKay suggests that we should be talking about performance assessment. And actually, one way we can assess someone's performance is actually observe them in the real world, which is very difficult with students. So we have to create a simulation in a real life of a real life activity in the classroom. And that is what we try to do, right? So it's not about, targeting specific language items or grammar, but it's really, all right, what is the student using English for in their real life or might be using it for one day? And let's do this in the classroom, right? That's the point. So that's performance assessment. Um, One more thing that I'd like to mention when it comes to the assessment of writing is basically the last line on this slide is that an appropriate writing test should take into account cognitive demands, right? Reproducing, organizing, reorganizing, inventing, generating information, right? And communicative function, as well as this learner's needs, right? So this communicative piece is often lacking. If you think about what is done in the majority of classrooms for the majority of the time, it's essays, right? And a lot of teachers like essays, and even researchers are, some researchers are for essays, but think about the communicative purpose and the learner's needs, right? Essays are fine, but I think we need to go a bit beyond that. So before I go into details about the study, just a bit of a context of regarding the teaching and learning of English in Croatia, specifically writing. So in Croatia, students start learning a foreign language from grade 1 or year 1 of elementary school, which when they're 6 or 7 years old. And for the majority of learners, they choose English as their first language, and then they keep learning it for 8 years of mandatory elementary education, and they can continue learning it in high school as well. And they can start learning another language in year 4, right? So when they're about 11 or at 10 or 11. In terms of grades and assessment, they get marked from 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, right? And one important change occurred a couple of years ago. A new curriculum was implemented, but this study was done immediately before the implementation of the new curriculum, which brought a lot of changes in terms of how skills are taught and how they're assessed, right? So it will be interesting sort of to compare these results to what the teachers are doing now. But basically, when it comes to writing, right, what we have been doing, and I know this because I've taught in elementary school in Croatia and I've observed many classes in my different roles, we have pretty much been doing the same thing for decades, right? Teaching writing and assessing writing would come down to writing 2 to 4 high stakes assignments per year, which would be very stressful for the students. And there was no, and these were not really authentic tasks, but we'll talk about that a bit on. So what I wanted to find out is from our teachers in Croatia who teach English in elementary school from years 5 to 8, so children from 11 to 14 years of age, is what writing tasks do they assess, right? What do they give marks for? What criteria they use in assessment, and what are the issues that they face in assessing writing? So the third one was where I did the focus group, and the first two, I got the answers to it through a questionnaire. And this was done, as I said, prior to the implementation of the new curriculum. So it was in March 2019. And then you can see the other details as well. There were 98 English language teachers from Croatia, and most of them were specialist teachers. So that's a European thing. And this means they went to university for 4 years explicitly to become English language teachers, right? And they could teach from year 1 to year 8. They could teach in high school and so on. And most of them were quite experienced, from 11 to 20 years of experience in the classroom, right? One of the questions that I asked is, okay, which of these activities, scaffolded tasks, do you assess in the classroom in which year, right? And by scaffolded, I mean there's some kind of a support, whether it's very detailed instruction, whether there's a picture, whether there's a template, right? And this is what I got. So I'll just interpret this graph because it's a bit colorful, too colorful maybe. What is important to note is the green bar. So they do not generally assess translation, which I think is a good thing. And for the other tasks they assess sentences, they assess the writing of paragraphs, they assess the writing of a text. And unfortunately, but this is my personal stand, they assess text dictation as well. Dictation is very specific. I don't think it assesses writing only. It's much more than that, but never mind. For the purpose of this study, it's important to know that people assess from sentences to paragraphs to texts basically in all years, and they do not assess translation, which, as I said, is a good thing. Then I wanted to know, okay, but do you sometimes give your students tasks where you don't give them any kind of support, which I think is bad. But teachers do this, and they basically assess writing of a paragraph when you tell a student, okay, write about what you did on Saturday or what you do on your Saturdays, or even a whole text, write a story, right? Without any kind of support, which I think is not good, as I said. And they do this, right? And we see that it's done as the years progress in terms of writing a text. More and more teachers do this kind of a task. And then I wonder, what kind of criteria do you use? And this is what I got. And then again, I'll interpret this graph so it will become clearer. Most teachers in all of these years, so from year 5 to 8, they look at vocabulary, which makes sense. They look at grammar, they look at spelling, they look at the message, so that the person conveyed the message. They look at organization and punctuation. And very important to note, which you don't find in assessment handbooks and theory, they look and value the student's progress, right? So if they had a poor result previously, but they did something better now, they value this, and this is reflected in the student's mark, which is very interesting. And one thing I was happy to see, they don't assess or they don't mark down because of someone's handwriting. I think this is a good thing. And then I asked them to order these elements in the order of importance. So which one for you is like the heaviest? Which weighs the most? And that was vocabulary. I would have put message first, like was the student able to convey the message, but that's fine. It's second best. And then we have grammar, which is expected, spelling, organization. And again, you see this progress is still a thing, right? So it's not at the bottom. We have handwriting at the bottom, but progress, for example, is more important than punctuation for teachers in the weighing of these elements. They write a variety of text types, right? Essays, emails, letter, dictation, and so on. The three in bold are the ones that appear the most common from the 98 teachers. So it's essays, emails, letters. Letters are questionable today. How many of us send letters, actually? And they have a variety. One that sort of stood out for me, and I was not sure, whether this should be really assessed and marked, is the poem, right? I don't know the context, or retelling a text and writing, whatever that is. But in terms of what they use the most is essays, emails, and letters, right? And then I went into details and talked to 6 teachers, again, with the same questions, but also went into different directions. For the most part, they have been focused on summative assessment, which means they were not doing writing as a process-oriented thing, but product-oriented. They were constrained by the previous unwritten rules of assessing writing in terms of you have to write 2 to 4 times a year and that's it, right? According to them, the students don't like writing, and I understand why, and they don't feel to be good writers. So that's a wrong message that we're sending to them. And assessing writing is time consuming. So what my conclusion from this study and the teachers in the focus group is the issue with authenticity in view of text types and topics, right? And what I would suggest, and what I do suggest to teachers in teacher training, and what is happening with the new curriculum, fortunately, write more often, but write less in terms of the length, and vary the text types, right? It can be a million things, and I'm going to show you some prompts. And then have students carry a part of this responsibility and this burden of assessment by giving it, to them to peer assess and to self-assess. That's very important. And fortunately, as I said, it will be interesting to look at, what the curriculum is doing in the classrooms, right? The new curriculum. And I think this shift is happening, fortunately. And then one of the some of the questions that I ask teachers in teacher training is, did you ever have to show concern in writing, show kindness, express disagreement, express dissatisfaction, express condolences, reject someone, congratulate someone, wish someone good luck, persuade someone, forgive someone, make a promise, provide a counter argument? And then their answer is always, yes, yes, I really did. And then my question is, okay, how often did you do this in the classroom? Did anyone teach you to do this? And the answer is no, right? So we should be doing things that matter in the classroom. So going beyond that boring essay or a boring email or a boring letter, and explore different text types and really doing writing with a purpose, with an audience. So here are some of the prompts that I would suggest teachers use, but there are many more text types and prompts that you can use, which tackle some very important topics. So it's going beyond, describe your street or interview a famous person, which we often do in the classrooms. So it could be writing a note to comfort your friend, right? How important is this? It's very important. Or something creative like write a note to your neighbor explaining why you had to borrow their pet cat. Or your friend Kylie decided to meet with a boy she met online, try to explain to her why she shouldn't do it. Your friend Lee wants to get a dog, convince him that it's better to adopt. So we have this persuasive piece, which is something that really matters in our lives, right? And then a realistic situation that could happen is friend Kimmy posting offensive comments to a photo, right? So these are real life authentic topics, and it could be a variety of tasks as asking students to post comments on a YouTube video and so on. So I do think that this is the way forward and that we should move away from the boring essay. It still has a role and place in the classroom, but there are many more things that we should be doing in terms of writing to breathe life into L2 writing. And that's it. Thank you very much. I hope I'm on time.
Thank you very much, Jacob. Yes, well within time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for the insightful presentation. We have a few questions from the audience.
All right.
Starting with a question from Joanna Motteram, who says, did you get the feeling that there was reliable operationalization of the criteria process?
Right.
program?
So that's a great question. And that's what I asked in the focus group. Okay, so what is your criteria for progress? And there is no criteria, and that's the tricky part, right? And that's why it's not in any of the handbooks or in theory, because it's very difficult, to do this, to what is a 5 in progress and what is 1 in progress. But the teachers as human beings, and I think this is good, they value, that's the human piece in assessment. They value if a student shows that they've done better than last time. That's very important. But then again, are they marking down people who have done, a poor job now in opposed to previously? Most often they do not. So this progress is this positive element that they will reward someone with a higher mark if it's significantly better than what they did last time. From the point of validity and reliability, this is a huge issue, but it's a reality in the classrooms, right? And that it's something that we should deal with and try to maybe operationalize it.
What do you think that we can do to support teachers to help them with this process? Because obviously, if you're measuring progress, it helps if each time you assess the student, you assess them reliably.
Right. So in teacher trainings, we touch upon this, and I do tell them it's important to have some kind of criteria, but I don't want to, it's dangerous, to tell people not to do this because of reliability and validity, because I really do think this human touch is important. And now this is what I would do as a teacher. I would reward progress, but I don't have the answer on, how to make it in a way that all students have a fair chance at this, right? I really don't at this point. It's something I would love to look into, but at this point, I really don't know how to make it objective, right?
Thanks. Yeah, another question here from Joanna, and actually I wrote this question down as well. And I'd be interested to know the answer. Have you trialed any of your way?
Right. I did too. I did through teacher training, and they trialed it, and these are the tasks the students enjoy, right? It's a different thing after, that usual stuff that we've been doing for decades. And then when they see a task like this, their motivation goes up, right? It's a slight change maybe in the topics or the angle or the text type, and it works wonders for students.
Thank you. I have another couple of questions. In your presentation, you said that you found when you asked teachers or you asked the students, they hadn't explored those kinds of text types. Why do you think that teachers shy away from exploring that with their students?
Right. I think it's not about teachers shying away, just teachers doing the same thing they've been doing for a long time, because that's what the system does to you, at least in Croatia, because of some and many other things and administration that you have to do. So you don't get the time to think outside the box until someone shows you, look, you can do this differently, right? And they've just been keep doing it, as I said, from the focus group. There was this unwritten rule about 2 to 4 pieces of writing a year, and they, kept to that strictly. And then when they're told, okay, but this is not really a rule, and you can do different things, and you can write more, and they will do it. It's just about breaking the pattern, right? Just breaking the pattern. That's it. And I think we have wonderful teachers doing fantastic things, but often, as I said, the public education system kills them with the administration and different workloads. So they just do sort of follow the textbooks or do what they've been doing for years, right? But they are willing to do differently.
There's another question here from Alice Mendoza. She says, thank you very much for your presentation, Jacob. However, do you think teachers could circumvent the needs of the curriculum? Specifically, how do we build upon all of those, or all of these writing for authentic situation skills, which is obviously fantastic, and connect them to writing essays? All my students love writing for authentic situations, but they hate writing essays. Wondering whether there are any ideas for connecting the two types of writing.
Right. So one type of essay that I found that my students, and I teach writing courses, out of 8 or 9 types of essays, the one they enjoy the most, and I think that could be brought down to high school and elementary in a different form maybe, is the persuasive essay, right? Which is about, you have some sort of a attitude or opinion, or you want to prove something or want to prove someone wrong. And this is where you can get passion out of the students, right? They have to use convincing evidence, strong reasons, reliable sources. So they do bits of research and so on. So but if it's a boring essay, right, where they just have to say the dry same things that people have been doing for decades, they're going to find it boring. But if it's a persuasive essay, a topic they care about, so that's an important piece. They have to choose the topic themselves, which they also have problems with. Sometimes they have to guide them, but it has to be something that they're passionate about. So you ask them, okay, what is it that matters to you, or what do you hate? What do you want to change in this school, in this system, in this country, right? And then they can get passionate about writing and putting this evidence down. And I think the persuasive essay, out of 8 or 9 types of essays, is the one that works best in my classrooms.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more quick question. Another one from Joanna. Thank you for all your wonderful questions, Joanna. Do you have a framework for looking at the interpersonal in writing? The way forward texts are really interpersonally challenging. How can you make explicit the way to manage interpersonal relationships in text to your students? She says she's a big fan of Halliday's interpersonal metafunction tenor in SFL to do this.
Right. So thank you for the question. I'm not familiar with the framework. I would agree that they are challenging in terms of this interpersonal level, but the key thing in assessing writing is that previously in class we have to do the formative assessment, right? Students have to go through these text types and through similar topics, and then get the pretty much not the same, but of the same sort for assessing. So that's how we can tackle this challenge, because they are. And understand some of these prompts, for example, like the creative one, I would not use it for assessment. I would use it for formative assessment, for practice. Like the one, explain how you borrowed your neighbor's pet cat. So that's very creative. Not all students are creative, so you don't want to go there. But the one about writing a message of comfort to your friend, if this is something that we practice in class, I would expect them on the test to know how to write a message of comfort, right? So this preparation is very important.
Thank you very much, Jacob. That brings us to the end of the session. To those watching, please leave us some feedback on this particular session by answering the 2 short survey questions next to the screen. Excuse me. Thank you very much for attending, and I hope you continue to enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much again, Jacob, for that wonderful presentation.
Thank you, everyone, for questions.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Take care.